What's up guys, Asian here again with another PTS video. This is going to be the last one before 5.3.2, and then when the rebalance comes we will take a look at the patch notes and figure out what needs to be retested. But here we're going to be taking a look at alchemical poisons on stamina DPS. They were changed in 5.3.0 so that they would proc less often. I shouldn't say proc less often. They would proc the poison status effect less often. Now they'll only proc it as a standard 3% chance to proc because they are considered single target damage over time abilities. So if you guys recall, the chance of proccing an elemental damages respective status effects. So for example, flame damage, you might be able to proc burning, concussed for shock damage, and so on, is 20% for enchants, 10% for single target direct damage abilities. I believe it is 3% for single target damage over time abilities, 1% for AoE damage over time abilities, and then 5% for AoE direct damage abilities. So for example, something like Force Pulse would have a 10% chance to proc everything, Enchants would have a 20% chance, Poison Injection would have a 3% chance, and so on and so forth. So poisons were taking a higher percentage value than the standard 3%. Because of some sort of bug in the code. So now they've dropped it down to the appropriate 3% chance to proc the poison status effect, and so some people have been asking me, well, does that make alchemical poisons not worth running anymore? So today I'm just going to kind of answer that question. This is going to be fairly quick because we only really have to do 2 parses to kind of tease it apart. So the other alternative to running alchemical poisons would obviously be just to run your standard damage glyphs. So it would be something like an absorb stamina enchant and a poison damage enchant. You could also use something like a poison enchant and a disease enchant, for example. For this example, though, I did stick with a poison enchant and a absorb stamina enchant. It's because that's probably going to be the best combination of, helping out your sustain and also providing some decent damage as well. And we are still sticking with Nirnhoned and Sharpened, just because infused isn't really going to be the best when it comes to your front hand. The additional weapon damage you get from Nirnhoned is just way too strong. It just offsets a lot of, even if you have infused in the main hand, the fact that you have half potency on your enchant, combined with the very high amount of weapon damage you would get from using Nirnhoned, just doesn't make infused anywhere close to beating out Nirnhoned when it comes to most effective trait on your main hand. And of course Sharpened, because we need to be able to meet the penetration cap, so we need to have that Sharpened here, at the very least on a Stam Sorc. If I was on a, let's say, a Stamina Necromancer, I might not need to run Sharpened on my offhand. I might be able to run something like Nirnhoned and Infused, for example, but that would be a video for a different day. That'd basically just be me testing out various Stamina Necromancer traits and things like that. But on to what you guys are interested in, the actual parses. So here we have the poison weapon and the absorb stamina glyphs. So let's just hyper focus in on the damage that these glyphs are doing, and then the amount of ticks that we're getting from the poison status effect, which is here. So you see our poisoned weapon glyph gives us 718 DPS, and absorb stamina gives us 555 DPS. We have 41 ticks of poison for a total of 703 DPS. You can see here that our enchants are not doing very great. Part of it is we don't have infused, so that would obviously help out our enchant damage, as well as our proc rate, so we'd have more procs at a higher damage, so we'd have more DPS. But then we're giving up Sharpened or we're giving up Nirnhoned, and it's not really worth that trade-off just to get a little bit more damage on our enchants there. And then for the poison status effect, we can see 41 ticks of the poison status effect. Now here, this is the double Ravage health poisons. Immediately we can see that the Ravage health poisons are doing more damage than our enchants are. So the Creeping Ravage health poison is dealing 1,360. The standard Ravage health is dealing 1,201. We're getting 41 ticks of poison, the exact same as what we've got when we were running straight enchants for 769 DPS, just because we have a little bit more crits here, 27 versus 25. But we can see already that just taking a look at just the poison status effect, we're getting the same amount of ticks on both of these parses. So clearly, even though the alchemical poisons aren't proccing poison quite as often. It still seems to be proccing them enough that it probably isn't going to make that big of a difference. And then on top of that, we also have to take into consideration that alchemical poisons are going to be stronger than enchants, at the very least non-infused enchants. If our enchants were infused, at the very least, we would probably be close to doubling this DPS. So then at that point, DPS between alchemical poisons and our infused weapon glyphs would be pretty comparable. Plus our poison DPS with the glyphs would probably go up, but then you also have to consider you'd be losing DPS from not having a Nirnhoned main hand and not having Sharpened, so we'd have to figure out some way of making up that additional penetration, which might mean, for example, running something like Zogvins instead of Lakestes, or running one-piece Krog, one-piece Veldreth versus something like just two-piece Veldreth like I have here. So you're giving up more in order to kind of get your enchants to be stronger than alchemical poisons. So it's not really worth that trade-off like I mentioned earlier. So there's really no need to worry about having a swap from using alchemical poisons as a stamina DPS. They are still stronger than your enchants, and again, we're not running infused because giving up Nirnhoned and Sharpened is just too much of a sacrifice to make. Yes, your poison stats effect is going to go down a little bit, so those classes that are a little bit more dependent on the poison stats effect, the only one I can really think of off the top of my head is DKs for your additional stamina sustain. Yes, you're going to see a little bit of a hit there, but again, alchemical poisons are just a lot stronger than our poison damage glyphs, our disease damage glyphs, our absorb stamina glyphs. So despite the fact that they were nerfed, it's not that big of a nerf overall. I believe they were probably taking, I think they were taking the 10% chance to proc. So while the proc rate has been cut down a little bit, it's still not bad just because they do so much more damage than your damage enchants. But that concludes this video. Again, hold off on asking me to test anything until 5.3.2 patch notes come out tomorrow, because they will be doing some rebalance changes, so we'll have to read over those and see what needs to be retested. So don't make any requests just yet, just wait until those patch notes come out and then make a request on the patch notes review video that I'll be doing on Monday afternoon. But that's it for this video. Hopefully you guys found this informative, and I will see you guys in the next dungeon.